A quick note about this podcast. Conflicts of interest matter, so let me be very clear about this. We have a lot of patients who take and want to take CBD, and we get a lot of questions about CBD, and I do believe it's got a lot of potential, but I'm also pretty skeptical of unregulated supplement companies in general. So in the process of trying to find a company that I could trust and actually recommend to patients, I met Dr. Taylor Bright, who's on this podcast. Brilliant guy and doing it the right way. So we asked him to process CBD for our patients, and we even met the farmers growing the product. So I really, really trust this CBD product. But I'm telling you all this because we ended up investing in his company. So that means that my general advice to you would be, do not trust anything I say about CBD. All right, maybe weird advice, but even if I tell you I'm going to give you unbiased advice and science, the fact remains that I've got a conflict of interest. I'm going to talk about CBD, and my goal is to be very scientific and completely honest and transparent. But conflicts are important, and incentives matter. You should know what incentives anybody has who's going to be giving you recommendations in general. So if you do want some of the product that we've commissioned Dr. Bright to make, go to wildhealthcbd.com and use the code WILD10 for 10% off. If you're one of our patients, don't do that. Contact us directly, and we'll get you some to try. But remember, I'm biased. All right? I hope this is educational anyway.
Hey there, I'm Mike.
And I'm Matt.
And I'm Jody. The Wild Health Podcast is our quest into human performance, longevity, and personalized medicine. Together, along with experts in these fields, we'll learn how to live longer, better, and become smarter and stronger. We'll do the deep dive into the research and hard work of putting it all together, and you reap the benefits.
Okay, CBD. You all have questions, and we're working on answers. So since our CBD podcast, we've got a lot of questions. Questions like, does CBD work for PTSD? Does it work for anxiety, depression, sleep? All these specific things, and we
can definitively say maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So it turns out science is hard. So we want to give you good science-backed answers. So we're kind of scouring all the data right now. And when we answer those questions, we want to give you really good answers. In the meantime, we've got kind of a special situation today. We have Ben Greenfield here. I'm sure you know
special.
who Ben is. He's very special.
I'm a special person.
We've been hanging out with Ben the last few days at the castle here, having a great time, riding some horses, meeting some horses. American Pharaoh, Justify, the two greatest living horses ever.
Specimens.
They're pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But Ben has a deep knowledge of CBD. And we also have Dr. Taylor Bright here, who was on the last podcast, who has a deep knowledge and every day spends his days turning flower into CBD oil and putting it in bottles. So as we told you last time, Taylor has a degree in molecular biology from Princeton, a PhD in genomics from UC San Diego, and has spent quite a bit of time in this world. So we're just going to pick these guys' brains a little bit and maybe answer some of your questions, but just have a bit of a roundtable.
Hey, Matt, you forgot I have a degree in physical education.
You know, you got a master's degree in it, don't you?
Yeah, I do. But
Yeah.
mostly I have a glorified physical education degree.
So so the physical education part of CBD.
I can teach people how to bench press while on CBD.
While on CBD.
Nice.
So it's kind of funny. That's the original. When I very first started taking CBD, honestly, it was because to blunt the cortisol response, I was trying to put on a little bit of mass and weightlifting. So you're kind of joking, but I know a lot of people actually.
That was one of the reasons I first started taking it, was the effects on the endocrine system.
Yep,
Yeah.
me too. So I want to dig into that. One question I think we could answer that a lot of people have been asking us is, it is a supplement. It's unregulated. It's kind of the wild, wild west, and you never know what you're going to get in the bottle. So if you're choosing a product, I mean, I had the same issue, and I've actually went to farms. I've met farmers. I've looked at the product, and that's how I know Dr. Bright. I went to his lab. They're doing it the right way, and I wanted a product that I could take and that I could give to my patients. And so he's making that for us now. So Dr. Bright, if somebody's trying to decide what CBD to take, how could they go about making sure that what they're buying is going to be something that's a quality product that's not tainted with something else? Like, tell us your process in general and what someone could look for in the store when they're buying this.
So the number one thing you can look for in the store is that a company that is making all of its third-party test reports available. Ideally, we're directly on the bottle. Usually a lot of people use QR codes. You can go to the website and find them immediately. Or just maybe by going to the website or having other ways of getting it. But the ability to have access to those third-party test reports, which show things like pesticides, residual solvents, mold toxins, heavy metals. Companies that are doing it the right way are not afraid to show you those tests. And that's really what you need to look at when you're kind of evaluating bottles on the shelf and moving things forward. And the reason you need to look for all those things, one is because it's completely unregulated. And then also the way in which a lot of these bottles are created, the CBD is extracted from the plants, can be quite variable. And you get a lot of fly-by-night operations that are kind of just pushing these out there.
What do you mean by that, Taylor? Like what do you mean by variable? Are there multiple different ways to
So
extract it?
So there are three main ways to extract CBD used in the industry at the moment. So they are hydrocarbon extraction, which is predominantly through the use of butane. There's CO2, which is predominantly used in supercritical form. You can also use subcritical CO2 as well. And then there's also ethanol, which can be done cryogenically in frozen temperatures or at room temperature. And so those three
Or here in Kentucky, bourbon, right?
Yeah, bourbon.
Yeah,
as well.
bourbon ethanol.
Well, you're using paint thinner in your garage, right?
That's
Ben?
right.
Is that,
That's right.
Yeah, a lot of
in my home meth lab.
Yep, you find a lot of people doing the old butane in the basement, and then kind of finishing off with paint thinner. When you look at the test reports that are out there, or you work with some of the third-party groups, they'll kind of give out almost like PSAs when they find some really crazy stuff. And there's tons of paint thinner being used in these things that you'll find
So
out.
are we talking about actually seeing butane in some of these products?
So, so you'll see all sorts of residual solvents, butane included, where you are, because even in all the processes, including CO2, ethanol, and butane, they end up in some form of alcohol, whether it be hexane, heptane, or some sort of organic solvent, whether it be hexane, heptane, ethanol. And if you don't pull that off properly and you don't test for it at the end, you're just ingesting all of those chemicals, which is obviously not what we're looking for in a nutritional supplement. We use cryogenic ethanol. We feel it is a gentle extraction that allows most of the phytonutrients, terpenes, and cannabinoids to be extracted from the plant in a more natural form. And then we pull that ethanol off and test for any residual ethanol, and then kind of bottle it up directly from there.
Now, because CBD is largely a non-water soluble compound, are you somehow increasing the solubility by making it water soluble? I mean, I know sometimes you'll find it blended with things like turmeric to enhance bioavailability, but do you do anything of that nature?
So we don't personally do any of that type of stuff. We will provide our CBD or in a kind of a full spectrum format, just usually in coconut oil. We'll also formulate it up into some oil emulsions for topical use. Is the way that we prefer to do it. That brings a lot of the terpenes and additional phytonutrients along for the ride. We're looking at bringing on capabilities to move through distillate and isolate formations, in which then we would look to then do some sort of aqueous solubility with getting it into different formulations for different uses. Yeah,
a lot of people notice better effects of CBD. Earlier today at lunch, we were talking about turmeric, right? There was some turmeric root on the table, and I was talking about how when you find turmeric with bioperine or black pepper in a lot of supplements, that's to increase the systemic availability, but it completely decreases its effects on the gut. And that you can take turmeric and blend it with ghee or coconut oil, throw a little monk fruit sweetener in there and make yourself like a golden milk latte, and it's wonderful. It's very nourishing for the gut. And CBD, very similar. You can take your CBD, whatever brand it might be, like the Bright brand you were talking about or whatever, and get some turmeric root or turmeric powder, and you blend that up with like a little coconut oil or ghee and turmeric, and you get CBD that you really, really feel. I mean, with any form of it, you can increase solubility dramatically.
You've been in this world for a few years, Ben. You know quite a bit about it. I've actually seen some blog posts you've done about it. What are you finding people come to you and they're talking to you about using it for, and what are you finding the best results for? We have a lot of patients on this, and I've got patient story after patient story, but I'd love to hear kind of what you find people actually find it works for.
Well, because it's an antagonist of the CB1 and CB2 receptor agonists, meaning like it's going to antagonize what THC, for example, would do to that receptor. It doesn't actually interact with the CB1 or CB2 receptors. It's I think it's a 5-HTA1 receptor that CBD acts on, so a completely different receptor. But because it antagonizes the things that interact with the CB1 and CB2 receptors, like THC, it can do things like take some of the edge off of THC, decrease its psychoactivity. It actually decreases some of the cytochrome P450 pathways that would actually normally cause THC to be metabolized more quickly. You can actually slow its release. You can kind of bleed out the release. So anytime you're using any form of THC, if you have a higher CBD ratio or you take CBD along with it, you can actually kind of knock some of the edge, some of the psychoactivity off, and also get all the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant potential of CBD. That's kind of that's not necessarily like a medical or a health use case. It's just more of a way to enjoy something like THC more. Probably the most profound way to use it though would be its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potential. Based on it, especially with something like it's been studied for colitis and all sort of bowel issues, and it can decrease things like endothelial nitric oxide synthase or inducible nitric oxide synthase in the gut. It can decrease a variety of different interleukins and inflammatory molecules. So it's very, very good for people who have gut issues, who have whatever constipation, gas, bloating, things like that. It does a very good job with that.
Yeah, we talked on our last podcast about how some of the ulcerative colitis studies, we were a little disappointed in the results, but I have patients who talk about it helping. So whether it's placebo or whether we just haven't studied it well enough, it seems like there's something there. I think we just need a little more data on that.
The U.S. government filed a patent on the antioxidant potential of CBD. I mean, they obviously saw something there. So yeah, the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect. It actually has an effect on insulin sensitivity as well. Can increase insulin sensitivity. So there's some use case for managing blood sugar, managing diabetes, that type of thing. I wouldn't necessarily prescribe it to a diabetic, as a cure-all, but it certainly seems to have an effect in that respect. You mentioned earlier about the cortisol effect, and it certainly does seem to lower cortisol based on its activity on the HPA axis. So it has some good effects there. And sleep is a biggie. Sleep, anxiety, stress, a lot of the pathways, same thing related to the HPA axis. It can really regulate those pretty well. So a lot of people find faster sleep onset, decreases racing thoughts. The dosages in a lot of these studies, though, I mean, it's like 300 to 900 milligrams of CBD. Yeah. So, in many cases, it's a hefty dose, and that's why I talk about doing things like, blending it with turmeric or oils to make it more bioavailable, so you don't have to take your entire bottle of CBD, before bed each night, which could turn into a spendy habit.
Yeah, sleep is one that I've taken it for and actually measure. I've done different doses and looked at my Oura Ring, and it definitely has an effect on deep sleep and REM. But it's a much higher dose than what people normally take. I usually have to get over 100 milligrams.
Oh, yeah, 100 minimum in most cases. Yeah, especially if you're used to using it.
And it's tough. And as a physician, I would never recommend someone starting there. But just in personal experience for sleep, and everybody's different. And I know you talk about that a lot, Taylor, about how just everyone's different. And starting slow and going up is probably the best way to figure out what works for you.
It actually acts very similarly to adenosine on the adenosine receptors. So, if you're a heavy caffeine user or you drink a lot of coffee, something like that, it can also help in that type of scenario just by bringing a little bit more of an adenosine-like effect into the mix.
Now, Taylor, I asked you at one point with your extraction methods, because I know most of the big companies use CO2 extraction. And I asked you kind of, why wouldn't you do that? And I was kind of surprised at some of your answers. Could you explain why you all made the choice to use ethanol?
Sure. I mean, the basic reason is that we feel ethanol at the end creates a more natural product with the ratio of compounds that we're looking for, kind of more reminiscent of what you find in the plant. CO2, especially supercritical CO2 extraction, is quite harsh and it's super efficient, but it pulls out a lot of things, specifically plant waxes and lipids that you really don't want along with it. And then it has to go through this extensive winterization process where they pull out those fats and lipids. And, not only from a business side, but from a end product side, we just felt that cryogenic ethanol was really the way that we wanted to go. Subcritical CO2 actually can do some really interesting stuff if you have the expertise to run those types of machines. Less industrial relevant, because those types of machines you can't process too much. That's why you don't see a lot of people doing it. But essentially, we like our cryogenic ethanol because it has it's a gentle extraction process as opposed to supercritical CO2 where you got high temperatures, high pressures. And it's just lots of other groups have made different decisions, and those products, as long as they're tested at the end, could be just as good. But we feel ours brings specifically along with taste. And then kind of final full spectrum product.
And it's not left in the alcohol, like it's in now an MCT oil or something like that afterwards.
So we pull all of the ethanol off down.
And how do you do that?
So we use a machine called a rotary evaporator, where we pull it down to vacuum, where it lowers the ethanol's boiling point down to basically room temp, and you just boil off the ethanol while leaving all of the things that you want.
So you're not affecting the CBD molecule.
Correct. Yeah, we don't want to just boil it at what a normal room temperature, like a room temperature, with a room pressure boiling point of ethanol would be, because then you would have too much heat and you start to degrade some of those molecules. So pulling it down to vacuum helps a lot, also with speed.
And right now it's in the MCT oil, but I'm really excited. Taylor's making some with just pure C8 caprylic acid for us that we'll get to try.
Oh, that's
soon.
sick.
So
now,
nice.
with some of these other similar molecules like CBN or CBC or CBG, and they all have, those three, especially for sleep or anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety, seem to have possibly even greater effects than CBD. Are you starting to look at some of those to add those into the compounds or isolate some of those?
So yes, on both accounts. So we have a full cannabinoid profile on all our products. We have a kind of our blended product, which is strains that we get from farmers, around the bluegrass region, as well as you can start to get some single strain products where they have a specific cannabinoid profile with higher in CBN or CBG. So we're working on that. We're additionally working with another company here in Lexington to isolate specifically CBGA. That's a particular product or a project that they're interested in working on. But those are getting access to those specific isolated molecules, I think, is going to be a real game changer for the types of products that we can formulate and put out.
Yeah, I got my hands up in Washington a couple of months ago on a Delta THC-9 mixed with a CBN. So you've got a couple unique molecules, and the anti-anxiety effects on that with mild psychoactivity from the Delta THC-9, it was pretty profound, like different than CBD, totally different feeling.
Yep. Yeah. So many of the strains that exist right now are highly engineered, not genetically engineered, but just agriculturally engineered to be high THC or high CBD. As we start to learn the benefits of some of these other molecules, and we'll start to see strains that are higher in CBN, CBG, it's going to make it a lot easier to extract, because some of these molecules are at 0.1% in the plant, as you'll find CBD at 10%. So it's just very difficult to organically extract them. But I think as people become aware of them, we'll see more of them in the plants. Yeah.
And it brings up an interesting, so you're talking about THC now. We were focusing on CBD, but THC and CBD both, and we were talking about dosing. It brings up an interesting thing that Mike and I were just talking about, how everything we do, we try to do with a precision approach. Instead of just kind of titrating up or starting someone on a certain dose, we try to figure out what's going to work for that person before we even start. And it turns out there are some specific SNPs related to your metabolism for that as well.
Yeah, I recently just found this. I was actually trying to figure out why it is that when I take CBD, I don't sleep, where it seems like a lot of other people tend to get a good response in terms of sleep.
Well, and
taking CBD.
Probably because you wash it down with a shot of espresso.
Oh, that could be it. Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, just a general answer to that, most people, a smaller dose can be activating, a larger dose usually makes them sleepy, but it's pretty individualized too.
It is, yeah. So there's actually a SNP for that. I feel like that's like their new saying. There's a SNP for that. This one is the FAAH, which is it's the fatty acid amide hydroxylase or something like that. It's basically the enzyme that metabolizes AEA, which is that endogenous endocannabinoid that also acts on CB1. And there's a SNP for that basically the CC variant, which actually protects you against addiction to not only street drugs, but also alcohol. Those people actually have worsening sleep effects with any cannabis, so THC or CBD. So it just goes to show that for so many things that we do, there are variants between person to person. And I think this is probably why, if you look at the actual primary literature on CBD, it turns out that some people don't respond well with sleep to CBD or with taking CBD, and some people do. And the studies are mixed. And I think the reason the studies are mixed is because we're not separating out the people who are going to respond well and the people who aren't based on their genetics.
No, that FAAH SNP, is that one that's tested for by 23andMe, or you need a more complete genome analysis?
No, V4, and I think
so
V5.
go through your raw data.
Absolutely.
Are you looking at whether you're homozygous or?
So the CC specifically is the one that's going to have as far as we know, based on the literature, that's small studies.
So for listeners, you'd find the FAH SNP and you'd go and check and see, and if you're CC homozygous for that would indicate that you're one of those people who might be a poor responder to CBD.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we hear all the time people talk about, well, CBD helps sleep, but then maybe THC messes up some deeper REM and things like that. And it's probably not so simple that the molecule is doing that. It's the molecule with that person's physiology.
Right, and to be
tease
clear,
that
I mean,
out.
in the research, there's plenty of studies that suggest that CBD improves your slow wave sleep and your REM sleep, both of them. But there is variance with that, and that's probably why.
But usually you hear people talking about CBD improving those, but THC having a potentially detrimental effect on them. But it's probably related to this SNP because this SNP is related to metabolism of both.
Yep.
The other interesting thing is the exercise performance factor. You look, especially in the endurance world, a lot of ultra endurance athletes who aren't necessarily competing in events that require fine motor skills or balance. They'll use ratios of CBD to THC, like a 10-to-1 CBD to THC ratio. Where you've got, for example, like 10 milligrams of CBD and 1 milligram of THC, or 20 and 2, and finding that helps a lot with things like pain tolerance, with being able to focus during these longer events, being able to kind of push through at the 20 or the 30 or the 40 mile mark. And the legality is questionable if you're competing in like a WADA sanctioned sport or something like that. But even off season, it's becoming increasingly common for people to use mild, like microdoses of THC with a larger ratio of CBD, and they find it helps out quite a bit.
Do you think that's the opioid receptor?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has opioid-like effects, opioid-like pain-killing effects, even at lower doses.
So do you think it's just dulling the pain in those type of scenarios, or do you think it's working in different mechanisms? Because I've also heard of some MMA fighters and people like that doing the similar ratio and having some positive effects. Of course, it's not legal, like you mentioned.
We know it decreases stress, your stress response, right? I mean, because it acts on that you were just mentioning earlier. It acts on the 5-HT3, right? Yeah. So it's decreasing anxiety, it's decreasing the stress response. So it could be all stress response mediated.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's acting on P450 pathways, it could even have a mitochondrial effect. When you consider that's that and an antioxidant, there might be a little bit of a performance enhancing effect in terms of ATP production as well. But that's just theory. I haven't seen any studies on that.
What are you guys using the CBD for now?
So for me, I primarily use it for sleep. I've just seen good effects. I don't use it all the time, but if I definitely need to get good sleep, I know it's a reliable thing I can go to. And it's not like melatonin. I have a little more concerns about melatonin, obviously, Ambien and other prescription drugs like that, just not good long term. I just feel much more comfortable with this. And I think it's worrisome anytime you have to have a crutch, any certain substance you're taking for something natural like sleep. So I try not to do it all the time, but we all know how important sleep is. And if it helps my sleep and optimizes my sleep, it's just something that's pretty natural from a plant that I'm not all that scared to use it for.
Yeah. I'm right on board. I'll use a lower amount for a nap. Like I'll use 40, 50 milligrams for a nap, and then in doses above 100 for sleep. And then, we'd probably be remiss not to mention the fact that it's a topical too, right? Like a topical for muscle spasms, for muscle pain, for soreness. A lot of people now are even using like the CBD infused coconut oil as like a sex lube or something in the bedroom. There are companies now doing both THC and CBD lubes. I'd be remiss not to, of course, allude to the fact that I haven't know people who are using it as for things like enemas and things like that to relax spasticity in the colon. When they're doing something like a coffee enema. So there's a lot of different ways it's being used topically as well.
Speaking of enemas, did you get your kits? Did they come to the concierge?
All right, so we got to give people the background on this.
Yeah, that's
so
way too inside.
So I showed up at the Kentucky Castle here, beautiful property that Matt owns and runs, and he gave me a concierge, like our own personal concierge here, Logan, incredibly helpful fella and very friendly, bent over backwards to help us in every respect when we checked in, and he said, if you need anything at all, let me know. So my boys and I decided to punk him, and we sent him a message and said, if you can, we need 2 child-size stainless steel coffee enema kits with mid-size tubes. We need extra virgin coconut oil for lube, preferably country of origin, Cambodia or Indonesia, and we need these tonight. The boys are severely constipated. he spent the next. I hope I didn't use the time that you're paying him too intensively here, Matt.
No,
but
it's worth it. So
he was calling Walgreens and shopping. He's like, I can get these overnight on Amazon, but they won't be to your room in time. And he was shopping all over the place. And finally, I called him up and I said, dude, we need these like now. And he said, I'm just scrambling. And finally, I was like, dude, Logan, we're punking you. We don't need stainless steel enema kits. And the funniest thing was after we had a good laugh on the phone and hung up, I got a text message like 60 seconds later and said, so the coconut oil, are you still going to need the coconut oil? I'm like, no, it's all a joke.
Well, I talked
don't
to him
need that either.
like 30 minutes after you texted him. He's like, I'm having trouble finding these. I'm like, just make it happen, man. Just make it happen. That's it. It's your job. So yeah, he's a good sport about it. So Taylor, if somebody just is looking at a shelf right now, trying to pick a good CBD. What's the easiest and quickest way? I know you talked about the third-party testing. Is that something they can figure out from the bottle, or are they going to have to go to people's websites?
Well, real quick on that, though. I mean, can we actually trust the third-party testing? I mean, what's to say that these companies aren't just like making one super awesome batch and taking it to the third party and then making a bunch of crappy batches and then selling that to everybody else?
100%. Honestly, there's nothing. There's nothing we can say
Good
against
enough.
that. I mean, I've looked at some test reports, and if you read deeply enough into these, it'll say, okay, here's our test report. How many units are in the test report? And it'll be like 30,000. So they're giving you one test report for 30,000 bottles coming off their line, right? And so there,
give me an idea. How many days of processing is 30,000 bottles?
Well, it depends on how many thousands of pounds you can move through your facility, but 1,000 kilos or about 2,200 pounds will give you about 100,000 bottles. And so if you are
we're talking about a lot of product.
It's a lot of product that you can come out. I mean, we large scale groups can push probably 20, 30, 50,000 bottles through in a month. So with 30,000 unit. It might be a month's supply, but more to the point is, unless you're doing this at CGMP levels, you don't have the internal controls to know that all of those 30,000 bottles are anywhere near the same.
Yeah. It'd be nice, there's like the website Labdoor, right? Like they do this with supplements. They just order straight from the website. They got their own mass spec. Like they do all the analyses themselves. But I'm not aware of anything like that in the CBD industry.
You've got a mass spec. You've got $1 million lab. What if you tell me if we could do this? So what if we had listeners actually send us what are the brands you're using? We buy them. We have you test them. Is that even possible? I mean,
certainly, yeah. I mean, if you send us bottles, we can test them up and see how they.
Reader's Digest.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the
Consumer Reports.
This was done in the literature a couple of years ago, and they found I think it was something like 67 or 70% of all CBD bottles were mislabeled. They were looking mainly for CBD content. But yeah, certainly we can get some bottles and push them through, see what happens.
Taking this, and it's like, I mean, it's such a huge industry right now that we should do that. I mean, you bring that up.
Yeah.
We're talking to somebody that's got a mass.
It's definitely because I get bottles sent to my house all the time. Every day, and I'm lugging packages up and down the driveway. It seems like half of them are CBD. It's like CBD, keto, and a few other choice things are the hot topics. So I'm always getting keto bars and keto powders and CBD oils, and you try them, and some have just like an instant, very powerful effect, and some you don't notice a thing, and you're using the same dosage, right, theoretically from each.
Yeah.
So, in my own experience, they're definitely not all created equal.
Well, especially if you start getting into edibles of any type. Number of people making these things lose track of the concept that when you bake something and the moisture goes out, you have a reduction in volume. And so now your reduction in volume leads to an increase in strength, and so who knows where you are. You see a lot of this on the THC front out in Colorado and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, very unregulated. You're kind of at the whim of the companies you're working with, and so I think third-party testing or some sort of group like this, putting it together would go a long way.
Or just knowing the company really well and trusting them.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the time and the ability, outside of just looking on the shelf, go to the website, check out the company, look at the reviews.
In a lot of ways,
talk
it's
to people.
The best piece of advice I can give to people on edibles: if you're a complete newbie, eat it. Then wait about 5 minutes. If you don't feel anything, eat another one. Wait 5 minutes, eat another one.
Yeah.
There's a host of stories out there from people who
just to be clear,
disclaimer,
then you have that shit moment when it all finally settles in.
You're currently being pumped.
Yeah.
We brought on our new staff guy, and he might be 125 pounds. I think he's like a featherweight or something. Anyway, we sent him home with a bottle and said try it out. He took it. He took a mill of our extra strength, and he was like, I didn't feel anything, so I took another mill. He's like, I had some vivid dreams. It worked for him, but I don't recommend shooting 2 meals back to back or doing 2 edibles in 5 minutes. Go start low and go slow here.
So just to be super clear, Ben was joking, just so we don't get any emails from people.
I wouldn't do that.
We're going to do the testing. I think that's a great idea. We're going to, if you all send us some messages on Instagram at Wild Health MD, what brand you take, we're going to pick a few. We're going to test it at our expense.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to get some paint thinner in my basement,
Yeah.
make up my own little home brew, send it down
us.
to you guys.
Ben CBD,
Put some chicken poo and some goat hairs in there, see what you guys find.
Yeah.
Just
Just to see how many different organic solvents we can find in this thing.
That's a weird peak. I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah. So so this is we may not have given you a ton of great information on this podcast, but we did just want to. We have Ben here. We wanted to pick his brain, and also a lot of you all may not know this. You think of Ben as this super smart, really cool guy, but we've been hanging out with his family, and I'm going to tell you, out of his family, his 2 kids, his wife, and him, he's clearly the 4th most cool person in that group.
Mm-hmm.
And they're here, and he's with us, so I kind of feel bad taking his time. So, Ben, if you have any other thoughts on CBD, let us know. But otherwise, I want you to be able to get back to your family and enjoy them.
I don't know where the hell they are. They're out there in the sauna or picking their way through the fish pond. Well, I'm neither super smart nor extremely cool. But the thing with CBD, let me think if there's anything else. We touched on the antioxidant, anti-inflammatory potential, the endocrine system, the insulin play, some of the effects on its interaction with THC, the endurance and the slight decrease in pain, the sleep improvements. I can't think of a lot else. Aside from the fact that, as you already alluded to, Matt, it's one of those things that I think can be used during the daytime. Again, like dosages as low as 5 to 10 milligrams. I've given my wife when she's had migraines or headaches, and I mean, a dose that low helps within about 20 minutes. And then for sleep, THC, in my opinion, seems to, in most cases, disrupt most sleep, including deep sleep. And I've never seen that effect with CBD. It only improves, with the Oura Ring, for example, my sleep score just goes through the roof on that stuff. So, it's one of the few things that I take to help me get to sleep. And, it's working. And the only thing I'll use sometimes is something to improve, the amount of my inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA. So, we were looking at the label of that sleep remedy stuff last night with a little bit of pH GABA in it, or, keeping like some passion flower extract or something like that next to your bedside at night. If you wake up at like 1 or 2 or 3 a.m., that I find that helps more than CBD. But for sleep onset and a good night of sleep, CBD seems to help 9 times out of 10. Unless you got that effed up snip that Mike was filling us in on.
FAAH. And just to be clear, we're gonna have another podcast. We're gonna go over epilepsy and depression, autism, some of the brain and psychiatric effects of CBD, because there's some pretty strong literature there, and I've been working on a pretty aggressive literature search on that stuff. So we'll come back together for that one here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and it's tough for us. We get stories all the time about it helping people, but I mean, as scientists, we want to go over the literature and talk to you about that and what's proven. So we're going to do that for each specific indication, but I just thought it'd be fun to chat. Taylor, any other recommendations for people when trying to make sure they're getting what they think they're getting with CBD?
No, I mean, it starts and ends with the test reports. If the test reports are made available, because many times they don't make anything available. It's just so and so's CBD blend on the corner here. So, and then find reputable companies that are in the industry for the right reasons. And when you find one that works, stick with it.
Great.
Oh, we should give people a recipe. Just that nighttime recipe, like for your golden milk latte at night.
Yeah.
You get coconut milk. Use like that dosage of CBD we were talking about, like 80, 100 milligrams plus of CBD. You get some turmeric, like turmeric powder or turmeric root, and then like a really good monk fruit sweetener. And you can throw some ghee in there, or some extra coconut oil if you want. And you just blend all that up. You can heat up the coconut milk beforehand, and you get this nice frothy yellowish brew that just tastes great. And the other thing that you can add into it for an even better effect, I know you're growing some of these, Matt, so I was thinking about this today, is the reishi mushroom extract. If you can throw some reishi in there too, man, you have a nice little relaxing nighttime beverage. Don't have that before work in the morning though.
Yeah, most people don't have reishi in their backyard like I'm trying to grow, but
Yeah.
Four Sigmatic has a great product.
Yeah, I
There's
love
some
their
really
stuff.
There's some really great stuff out
Yeah.
there. That's an awesome recipe. We'll post that on Instagram too. We'll throw that up so people have got it written so they're not trying to remember that.
Sweet.
All right. Well,
Awesome.
Ben,
Thanks, guys.
Dr. Bright, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been
Thank you.
fun, and we're going to bring you some more CBD knowledge soon on SNPs and everything else that you've been asking us about.
Sick. Thanks, guys.
We hope you like listening to the podcast as much as we like making it. If you think it's valuable, share it with somebody. Send it to someone you think would really benefit and leave us a 5-star review in iTunes. Those reviews really, really help us out. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at WildHealthMD. If you didn't like, well, why are you still listening? Email us and let us know what we can do better. But the best way you can thank us for our time is to leave a review and share. Until next time.